Welcome back to Eduwell. We recently had a very rich conversation with Anthony Carabache, which we actually split into two parts because there was just so much information to dig into. Anthony is deeply involved in researching AI use and how it impacts and supports educators. We covered a lot of valuable, consequential, and honestly, at times concerning ideas, and there was just so much to take in that we didn't get to our usual takeaways. So we felt it was worth bringing Anthony back for a third time to dedicate an entire episode to pulling out those key takeaways. Let's dive into the well.
Welcome to the Eduwell Podcast, a show created for, by, and with teachers. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chelsea. Our goal is to share insights and connect with fellow teachers on how to thrive both personally and professionally.
Join us as we dive deep into the well of information filled with relatable tips, practical discussions, and ideas that go way beyond the classroom walls. Let's be well
and do well together.
Welcome, Anthony. We are so happy to have you back.
Again, totally my pleasure.
Well, I have to tell you, as soon as the last episode ended, there was so much content. Chelsea and I were sitting there stunned after your multiple mic drop moments, and we just did not know what to do next, even though every other episode we've done with Eduwell has had takeaways. And so as soon as we got off the call with you, we ended up on a call together, and we had to figure this out. You've been so gracious to accept our invite to come back to do a very special episode that is just all about takeaways.
So, Anthony, we're going to talk about some big ideas here. I'm going to summarize what we discussed in the last episodes, and then we'll see what any final messages are. Last time, we talked about understanding AI as teachers. That was the big idea, and understanding what's happening behind it so that we are not over trusting it or completely avoiding it altogether. We also talked about how AI is built on data, it's shaped by bias, and it is influenced by human output. And that it's a product more than just a tool, which of course means we need to look at it very critically. We also talked about the fact that it is invasive technology with impacts that go beyond the classroom into things like the environment. But let's talk a little bit about what some key messages or takeaways are that you might have for us based on those ideas. Alex, of course, you can chime in.
I'll let Anthony do the leading here.
So there's definitely growing concern around the United States in particular as big companies like Microsoft, Anthropic, OpenAI, even NVIDIA, who are key producers of the microchip and the technologies used to power artificial intelligence. And essentially what's happening across the United States is that anywhere there's land and a source of water, companies are sourcing those areas out to build data centers. And you probably remember data centers are, if you look at 2 or 3 football fields in length and then 3 or 4 stories high, they consume enough electrical power to power 1,000 homes. That's how much these data centers consume. So if you look at like a 1-month consumption, right? One data center will consume 1,000 homes worth of electricity. And there are a lot of stories in Nevada, for example, where communities are going without water because the water in their reservoir is being used to cool the data centers and the servers themselves. And the company's response to the scarcity of water is that, well, the water returns to the environment through the cycle, the water cycle. And the residents are saying, well, sure, the evaporated water may return to the environment, However, it's not raining over where it was taken from. It's raining elsewhere. And their electrical rates have gone through the roof. And so that's just one example. But right now, there are many examples. So there are really 2 issues that you want to take away from this. Every time you query AI, let's say a simple AI chat, you need to ask yourself, what community could you possibly be hurting whose electric bills have gone up 30 and 40% in order to power that chatbot? And what about the water supply for the humans in that region? And then the second really big, well, those are 2 big things on their own, but then the third really big problem is These companies are finding land in areas of the country where people are often at a disadvantage. They're either at a disadvantage through education or economics, or both, as they are hand in hand. And they are building in areas where they have no concern for human health, right? And they're steamrolling over people's rights because they don't have the money to afford a lawsuit or to afford a resistance. And so this is my opinion, the most egregious aspect of building these data centers. Okay. And then there's a corollary to that. So first we talk about the environment, then we talk about harming humans where they live through the environment. And then the third piece is what people don't realize is that those big tech companies have contracts with other companies in countries like Kenya, where they don't abide by the same labor laws. And the folks that are working for those companies, for example, in a country like Kenya, they scour all the chats. They are the human in the loop to scour every single chat to flag harmful content. Now, if you can imagine getting paid $2 or $3 or $5 a day to look at the worst things that humanity has to offer, the worst of the worst images, sounds, ideas, confessions. And this is a huge problem. And when those people offer resistance, the work is taken away from them and offered elsewhere. So those are really drastic harms, right? And that's kind of where we left off at. The environmental piece is huge. And the ripple effect of that is almost immeasurable.
I'm hearing environmental racism in that. I'm hearing the fact that we have, people who don't have economic clout having their spaces impacted. Well, I'm sure people who have economic clout have the ability to not be impacted. We use the word invasive. It invades the minds of the growing minds. It invades our jobs. You're bringing up that it invades the environments and life itself. And it sounds like the invasiveness is prioritizing tech over all of these key human elements. I mean, I want to get into housing and colonialism and a bunch of other issues, another episode once again. But that takeaway big idea, the idea that big tech is willing to sacrifice environmental spaces without considering the negative outcomes and the impact on people, says everything about just how serious this is. So my takeaway as a listener to you and a listener, as someone who reads, is that we do need to be thinking. We need to be so critical about this, and we need to know and understand all of these pieces. And for every piece that we're talking about here, there's 12 other spin-off pieces, right? That's why we needed a whole other takeaway episode. So thank you for that takeaway, Anthony.
Yeah, that is a big takeaway. And I'm feeling a little bit hypocritical here because I can't say that I don't use AI. Like, it's built into a lot of the programs that I use. So
it's hard. It's hard because it is a conditioning, right? So when you pick up your cell phone, that device that you put your hand in your pocket to touch probably every 30 seconds because you can't resist it, we forget as humans that there are children who are mining the lithium with their bare hands in parts of the world. And that even the glass, the shiny glass, the aesthetics, and the physical response of touching something like the glass uses tons of water, hundreds of liters of water to create. And so we've just been conditioned in this highly tech world to accept the end product. And when I say conditioned, they're designed to appeal to our base senses: touch, sound, and sight. Those senses are always firing when we're engaging with tech. And that conditioning, they built a bridge between the physical device now and this magical robot that can do your proofreading, that can create a lesson plan, that can create an agenda for a trip, right? So you shouldn't feel bad, but you should be feeling the call to interrupt this. And we as teachers have that duty. We have more of a moral duty than anybody, say for doctors and nurses, to interrupt conditioning that's meant to put people at a disadvantage or to enslave us, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is that whole out of sight, out of mind thing, right? Where, oh, look, like I said before, look at this big shiny object. This is so wonderful. But what is behind it? Because I feel like I am naive to this. So I'm glad that you're sharing this information with us so that we can open our eyes to the ethical considerations of AI. Let's get into our second big idea, which is AI in the classroom. We had a lot of discussion on this in the last episode, and we talked about how there's a really strong point around age and readiness for AI. We talked about how we can educate students about AI without necessarily putting it directly into their hands right away. And Anthony, you shared the analogy of a 3-year-old who can recognize a Jeep when it drives by, but we are obviously not going to hand the child the keys to that Jeep to begin driving. I think that's an idea that really sticks and that's super important for teachers to know. And we also talked about sycophancy and how AI can tell us what we want to hear, which can be especially concerning for those young, impressionable minds. So, what else do we want to say about those ideas?
I think the takeaway from, knowing about something versus knowing how to use it, and that analogy of identifying a Jeep versus driving it. When we as society, we give our young adults the right to drive or the privilege of driving, starting at the age of 15 through 16 and so on. They get to vote at 18. They don't drink until they're 19 here in Ontario and 21 throughout the rest of the United States. If we have these age limits, we should also consider these age limits in terms of the use of artificial intelligence. My dad was a very prominent engineer and technician, but also he was the head of safety at one of Ontario's largest nuclear power producers. And he had to deal with nuclear regulators all the time. And he likens AI to nuclear all the time. And his biggest fear after having a conversation with him over the last weekend was he doesn't want the harm to come before the regulation. And the world already witnessed what happens when we rush forward into technologies that we don't know, we don't yet understand, and we're driven by the wrong reasons. So if somebody is educated as my father, and there are thousands upon thousands and more every day who are asking for regulation, who are we to just hand the keys over to a child? That just doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't. And I have to say that the thinking on this one, I was on the same track. I kept on going back to social media and how at the same time as parents, were worried about kids going out and playing outside and having freedom, kids were inside accessing devices with people who can access, kids from all around the world. And I have firsthand seen the major negative influence that has. And countries are finally catching up, banning social media up until 16 years old. And I see this as just the version of it on steroids because you have machines now being able to have conversations 24/7 without that human component at all, that ability to, I have to take a pause and go to sleep for a bit and then go back to communicating. It can be 24/7. It can last hours upon hours. And that sycophancy piece. So I know I, for one, refuse to, under my watch, be a part of facilitating this as a possible outcome. And so, no kid in my realm is getting the keys to any Jeep at all. Not even the little mini ones, Anthony and Chelsea.
Oh, yeah.
Not even the little street ones that are super cute.
I love it. I hope your message reverberates around the world because I think teachers have to realize they have more power than they know. And when they hear somebody like you say those words, I hope they feel inspired to make the same decisions, or at least, like you, Chelsea, really peel back the layers and look at what's at the core and say, no, this isn't right. And so your leadership offers all of us hope, as long as we spread that message, right? We have to have the words. We must unite, and we must have the words. And the two of you clearly have those words. And I have to believe that there are so many others out there that have the words too. We just have to help them find the courage, help them with the words to use, and help them realize that they are too leaders. They are leaders, and we need leaders to lead right now more than ever.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our final idea, which is the fact that our role matters so much. In fact, it matters more than ever right now. So, some ideas we talked about were that we are currently in a reactive stage with AI, that there is so much that we do not understand about this technology, that we don't know about it, that we need clearer guidance and direction from ministries and educational leaders. And in the meantime, we are trying to make sense of it all as it evolves. And we need to know that our thinking and our judgment and our creativity remain at the core of teaching. So, what do you think we can hold on to the most when it comes to protecting our professional role in this moment of rapid change?
I love the question. And first and foremost is the option to say no. So we can argue, everybody can on both sides, right? Can argue about creativity, about critical thinking, about time saving. We can argue about those things from the beginning to the very end of this era. But if humanity wants to remain at the center of humanity, then we must feel free, empowered to say no, to say no. And that's the bottom line. And not to fall for the allure of convenience. Because when we fall for the allure of convenience and speed, we give up our only defenses. We give up who we are. That's a huge loss. We can no longer talk about things like resilience or problem solving or passion. We can't talk about creativity or critical thinking when we give them all away. And so this is a choice. This isn't an inevitability. This is a choice. And right now, teachers around the world have to make a choice. And for those of us that are ready to defend what it means to be human, what it means to learn, to make mistakes, to cry, to cheer, to sweat, to bleed, to be frustrated, and to be joyful, all of these things come under the supervision of a human who's lived their life and tries to offer their teachings to the child in front of them. That's what we're fighting for here.
That response for me, that same example that I brought up in the other episode, whereby I provided a task for the students. It was loaded with opportunities to critically think, converse, argue, maybe have a moment where they come to me and they're angry at each other and we need to sort that out. But within 2 seconds, we went from that potential to a nothingness, and all the answers were just presented. And you had called that gray, but a lot of the answers were decent that were produced by AI. But all the humanity of it was lost, and there was zero spark. The spark goes away in those moments. I don't think we've begun to touch the surface of how much we are robbing society of sparks. And this will be studied forever and ever and ever, the consequences of it all. And so I really do appreciate these types of conversations, because with every new topic that comes up, I am thinking of the possible outcomes long term. And I'm sure that everyone else is thinking of different outcomes. And by the way, I'm doing that without an AI bot because I have a brain.
Hey, good job.
Thank you. Okay, before we wrap this up, Anthony, I'm wondering, do you have any questions for us as two teachers who are day in, day out learning about this and, muddling through on the ground?
I have so many questions, but I guess the one question will come from my heart to your hearts is there are days where I feel empty. And I'm wondering if you two, as teachers, as folks with real experience in the classroom, if when you hear messages like this, is there a call to push back? Like, I would like to know from your perspectives what you are going to do.
Well, for me right now, I'm going to take in everything that you have said to me, and it makes me really rethink my own use of AI and how it is showing up in my classroom practice. So I have a lot of thinking to do about what I am going to do with this information. That is where I'm at right now.
I think for me, it is the big eye-opening moment that the time that it saves in the short term, the negative outcomes that exist as a result long term, and we discussed a whole bunch of them, does not make it worth it for me to save the time, because you will end up fixing and working so much more to undo the negatives, and the consequences are just too grand. So what do I do about that? Is every moment that temptation comes up, really thinking about, is this an ethical use of AI? Is there another way? How can I get to my end goal without utilizing, and also sharing that with my students so that they know to value their own thinking, et cetera, et cetera. And I've started in that process. But there is that temptation, Anthony, that exists for, certain usages. And we did talk in the other episode that there are usages that are really good for universal design for learning, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it really is pausing, stopping, and thinking every time you are about to possibly use it. So
thank you.
Well, thank you. I think it's really important in this moment to take a long leisurely walk, enjoying the beautiful environment that surrounds us, that is hopefully at this point untouched, and to sit around the well with some friends and to have some really deep conversations that feed our soul and that get imprinted in us in a way that perhaps looking something up with a chatbot does not. And open up these conversations with our peers, with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, and talk about it. That will help to fill the well and hopefully will help to instruct what happens moving forward with regard to the well, not just our own personal well, but the well of our communities, the well of our country, the well of the world, just the well of all. So there's a little well reference for us at the end here.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Anthony, thank you so much for coming back again, and we look forward to talking to you more.
Thank you both for this opportunity. I appreciate it so very much.
Thanks for listening to the EduWell podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend, subscribe, and leave a positive review. It helps others to find us.
Follow us on Instagram and Pinterest to help spread the word. Until next time, be well
and do well.